Hi there, and welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, our YouTube edition of the show. And today we have something a little bit different than case studies. Well, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. It's related in both ways. It is our new book, which is due to be released. When is it going to be released?
Well, the publisher's going to tell me tomorrow. However, it's going to be within the next several weeks, so I think you can figure by the 20th or 25th of November.
Just before
the stores.
Yeah, just before the holiday season. So if you feel like getting a gift for friends and family who are a little on the fringe, you can always give them get a copy of our book.
You get them several copies in case they lose one.
What are we going to be talking about today, Dad?
Well, here it is on the hoof, Behind the Paranormal. Everything you know is wrong. And we thought today that we would, by way of case studies, go through some of the 50 or so cases that are in this book. Mm-hmm. Just by using the table of contents. Now, it is available for pre-order on Amazon.com. And if you look here at the table of contents, we have a foreword by the great Stanton T. Friedman, the great grandfather of ufology, and who makes the comment that perhaps because I am 80 years old and have been lecturing all over the world for many years about unusual phenomena such as UFOs, I'm often asked to write forwards for books, etc. In the case of Behind the Paranormal by Paul and Ben Eno, it was a pleasure to read their courageous book, etc., etc.
I'm glad he called us courageous.
Yes, well, let's see how courageous we are. All right, well, the first chapter, there's an introduction as well, written by us, and then the first chapter is really starts at the beginning, the paranormal in human history. Now, this book essentially is a compilation of scripts that we've done over the last 8 to 9 years on CBS radio for 4.5 years, and then on WOON 1240 in the Boston, Worcester, Providence Triangle, where we broadcast from each Monday.
Ironic that it's a triangle.
Yes, it is, very much so. So the influence of the paranormal in human history is quite substantial, whether it be actual paranormal events or simply belief in the paranormal by various cultures. We start out with the Elohim Enigma, a very, very strange phenomenon, whereby the word Elohim, which is the oldest word used for God, the first word used for God in the Bible, the book of Genesis, which is a masculine word with a feminine plural ending. I mean, there's no other word in Hebrew or any other Semitic language like it. Mm. And we go through that, and it's very odd connections. It means, translated literally from the Hebrew into English, the shining ones, plural. So all sorts of speculation can result from that, and we do so.
Now, have you asked rabbis about that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I went to a temple to study Hebrew specifically because they didn't teach us Hebrew in the seminary. You picked up a little bit, but I learned enough. They were wonderful down there, Temple Bethel in Providence, and I have spoken to a rabbi about this, and he said essentially Hebrew, especially ancient Hebrew, it really depends on who's reading it, who's translating it, and who's believing what it says, because it can say different things according to what you believe, because Hebrew has no vowels. Mm-hmm. Modern Hebrew has vowel marks, but in ancient Hebrew, there were no vowel marks, and the words were all run together. So you could translate the first... We're used to reading the first verse of the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, if you translate it another way, it can say, when it began, the shining ones stood upon the heights and looked down upon the highlands and the lowlands. But what we do in chapter 1 here is to match that ancient document with two contemporary documents, in other words, documents written at about the same time, which are the Atra Hasis documents of the Akkadian Empire, which was the first known empire in the ancient world, in the Middle East, and then also the Karsag epics of the Sumerians. Okay, and you have the same narrative, really, I think, running all through the creation stories of these three peoples, which are quite similar. In Genesis, you have the Garden of Eden, okay, which essentially, if you read it in the other two documents, talks about the same thing. But if you take out the divine imagery and simplify it a little just by applying practicality to it, it comes out that there was some sort of what appears to be an agricultural colony in the ancient world, and in the Karsag epics, it's extremely blunt that Ninlil, who was known, I should say Nin Karsag, who was known as the mother goddess, whom the Sumerians called Mama, did a DNA modification experiment. She took DNA from the saliva and blood. It says that, it doesn't say DNA.
I was going to say, does it say DNA splicing?
No, but it says blood and saliva taken from one of their people, and she combined it with the native peoples, presumably our remote ancestors, to come up with a sort of a worker class. All right, I mean, that's what it says. Now whether it's true, I don't know. And I don't know why ancient peoples would make up such things in such detail. Proceeding from that, you have wars among the gods. I mean, much has been made of this in the books of Zechariah Sitchin and people of this kind. You have in Genesis, it's the battle between good and evil. You have various other documents of the ancient world, such as the Mahabharata of the poem of India. It's the longest poem in the world. And
well, it's like a good friend of mine, one of my groomsmen at my wedding, Gio, was saying that before, he told me a very fun fact that before planes existed, most of the Indian languages already had a word for plane.
Yeah, Vimana.
Yeah, Vimana.
yeah, that's right. Because in the Mahabharata, you have these gods flying around in Vimana. I mean, take it or leave it. But I mean, the whole idea is that something was very strange was going on. Now, there was lots on television about ancient astronauts and things of this kind. However, some of it does make you wonder. We mentioned in chapter 1 here, too, that when the Human Genome Project when the human genome was mapped, the entire map of our genetic makeup was completed in 2003, 2004, they found 223 genes that shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. If life as we understand it developed according to the ideas of Darwin and evolution. They have no precursors in the history of human evolution. So the scientists were casting around for some kind of explanation, and they thought, well, must be horizontal transfer from bacteria. I mean, I don't know, I'm not quite sure what that means, because my degree's in philosophy, not genetics.
Biology, yeah.
Yeah, but in any case, these are all things. There are lots of questions about whether someone messed with our genes way back when. All right, so that's part of it. But we also get into a few other things in human history that we talked about briefly on the show from time to time. We have the more recent paranormal events that occurred, for example, here in New England. The Spectre Leaguers. Now, a lot of people don't realize that in 1692, which was several months before the Salem witchcraft hysteria broke out, there was an outbreak farther north on Cape Ann in Massachusetts of these Spectre Leaguers, as they were called. And a Reverend Emerson, who was a first cousin of ours, we're an old New England family, mm-hmm. reported to none other than Cotton Mather, the well-known Puritan writer, these bizarre stories of these white-clad figures, sort of bothering everybody on Cape Ann, farther up the coast from Salem. And they were afraid these were, either the French, the demons, or something else. And I don't know, at the time the French were pretty much feared, so which was worse than the demons, I don't know. So that's related in the book, and they became bold that they would be shot and would all fall over in a group and then get up and run away. They would play tricks on people.
This stuff up.
No, you couldn't. I mean, it's in the Magnolia, in the book written by Cotton Mather, which is translates from the Latin, "The Wonders of Christ in America." Mm-hmm. Christ had to do with this, but. And then the people would gather in the fort, and they'd be pounding on the walls from the outside, and there were strange lights seen in the sky and things of this kind. So following our discussion of the Spectre Leaguers, we get into George Washington and the Angel. And this supposedly occurred in 1777 during the terrible winter at Valley Forge, and Washington supposedly had an angel appear to him and tell him to keep fighting, because they were ready to give up. And she essentially told him effectively the history of the United States as it would unfold, including the Civil War and then some odd stuff into the 20th century. Now, there are several things that make me suspicious about this.
Because, I was going to say, that sounds more like kind of like a folk legend kind of thing.
Well, exactly. It appeared in a magazine for Civil War veterans after the war, I believe it was in the 1880s. And you've got the angels holding the American flag, and she's calling him son of the Republic. And this is eminently suspicious because, it just is. However, the importance of this from the paranormal and historical standpoint is that even if it didn't happen that way, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people believed that it did, and it had an influence in strengthening American nationalism at the end of the 19th century, leading to the Spanish-American War and this sort of thing. So it really is certainly a direct influence of paranormal belief, if not paranormal phenomena, on American history. Then we have the ghost who helped Canada. Must bring our Canadian cousins in on this,
Sounds
too.
like Casper.
Well, not quite. This was not as pleasant as Casper. There was Lord Dufferin, who was Governor General of Canada in the 1870s, a very, very able official. And the Governor General is not the Prime Minister. Really, well, I'm not going to explain Canadian politics, but it's an important position. And before he became Governor General, was in Scotland in a castle staying with a friend, and he happened to look out the window in the middle of the night, and there was a man with a very evil-looking face carrying a coffin across the lawn. And he swears this happened. To this dying day, he swore that this occurred. So push came to shove, and he had all these amazing jobs, and he was Governor General and this sort of thing. No, he was Governor General after what happened next happened. He was in an elevator, I believe it was in London, and he was about to get into the elevator, and the door opened, and the elevator operator was this evil-looking guy, the same guy he saw carrying the coffin. And he refused to get into the elevator, which proceeded to plummet to the bottom and killing everybody in it, including the guy. So Dufferin thought he really never got over this. Then he became Governor General of Canada and did a great job. And so maybe, I suppose...
Yeah, I remember that show. That's terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. So
that was horrifying.
Very, very horrifying. So that's part of our chapter on the paranormal and human history. Then we have the Battle Hymn Mystery. Mm-hmm. And Julia Ward Howe, another cousin of ours, happened to wake up very straight. Now, the melody was already in existence. She had heard the melody during a parade in Washington, D.C., which was very, very heavily fortified during the Civil War, as you can imagine, because the Confederate lines are really right across the river or not far away in Virginia.
Yeah.
So she began to, she just awoke one morning. Somebody had suggested that she write other words for it. She woke about 4 o'clock in the morning at this hotel in Washington. The sun was just coming very gray. She got up before she realized what she was doing, took the old stub of a pencil, wrote all the words to the Battle Hymn of the Republic without even thinking about it, without even stopping. And she just doesn't know, she never knew how that really occurred. It just came to her, and of course it's a very, very famous American patriotic song even today. Mm-hmm. So that we have an influence on history there. We have the angels on the battlefield. We recount certain cases where soldiers reported seeing angels in the sky, as particularly during World War I. And it may have been made up, maybe not, but there were soldiers who swore they saw this sort of thing. However, the public believed it. So even if it didn't happen, it got the war fever going because people thought God was on their side and all this sort of thing, particularly in Britain. We had the paranormal president, of course, Abraham Lincoln.
Ah, yes.
Who was a rather morbid fellow. He had a sense of humor, some of it very off color, but he was rather morbid because he and his wife had lost a child early. And in fact, they lost most of their children, and he has no descendants. So it's really it was really a very sad life that he had, and they got into spiritualism and this sort of thing. And he had a dream of his own death in the White House. This is well attested by friends of his. And he walked down one day into the East Room in a dream. And he asked a soldier, who's dead in the White House? And he said the president was killed by an assassin. And, of course, he was killed by an assassin in 1865, just after the war ended. So there's this, supposedly the ghost of Lincoln is seen in the White House today. Of course, we wouldn't say it's the ghost, it's the actual president, and you have time slips going on. So essentially that's our first chapter. the influence of the paranormal in human history, I think, in human culture, in human thought, and certainly deep within the human psyche itself, is very, very prominent, and I think it's perhaps the basis and the background for our entire human experience.
No, that was a fine summary of our first chapter. And if you want to get more of this book, it's going to be out in late November. You can
2016, yeah.
Yes, of 2016. So of this year, and you can check out our show website. That's behindtheparanormal.com, where you can get details on that. You can also find it on Amazon.com, our publisher's website as well. That's schifferbooks.com, and we'll have links to that in the description. And you don't forget to subscribe and like our videos, and we are going to be creating as much content as possible and making time for this as well. So thank you for watching, and thank you for coming with us on our cosmic journey.